Welcome everyone. In this video, I will be covering the first round of the Speeches Championship quarterfinals. This match was played between Fabiana Caruana and Alireza Firouzja, with Caruana going in being the underdog after, I would say, even though he's seen as a better classical player. But when it gets into time scrambles and wild calculation, seeing that Firouzja is the favorite, although going into it, according to chess.com fans or people watching, Caruana was 60% of people thought that Caruana would win. So, and also, yes. So sit back. I've got 3 games put together, just pivotal points in the match. You learn something, and yeah, tune in for the next future rounds. Okay, here we go. First game in our recap for the quarterfinal match is game number 3, where Alireza has the white pieces against Caruana. In the first game, Caruana defended quite nicely after having a worse position and managed to hold a draw there. In the second game, he was completely winning, but then blundered an elementary queen pen, which was really unfortunate, because otherwise he would have been up currently 1.5 to 1/2, and the match would have been completely different. But how it is, Alireza's up 1.5 to 1/2. So let's see what happens if Caruana could bounce back. So was he opening? Alireza opened with e4 here, and then e5, as everybody goes, just walking into a Spanish, the old tried and true. And then, so here we go, was that Spanish? He plays a more piece defense with a6, bishop b4. We don't want to go to the bishop pair. Going into a Berlin type style. Just developing normally, right? Nothing too crazy. We can just go through the opening pretty quickly here. c3, want to push for d4 eventually, but not quite yet. It's a little premature there. h6, we don't want to allow the bishop g4 pen. I'm just going through this pretty fast because this is all pretty well-known stuff, very standard in the Spanish, which you might have seen it a trillion times. Bishop b7, a4. Okay, actually I didn't know that was top move. Bishop a2, because I would have played bishop c2. They're both very similar. But bishop a2, we want to just keep it on this diag. The a2 to f7 diag. So it makes a lot of sense here. I just wouldn't have played it. But that's why they're playing it, right? Well, one of the many reasons. Just taking advantage of the strong pin here. I'm just going to kind of go through until we get to a more pivotal moment. Because so right now it's just all opening prep. Caruana is doing quite nicely here. He's managed to actually build an advantage. Being better 0.6, just able to get this knight over to f5 soon. You've got this, that's white. But he's able to have two bishops. He's up a pawn currently, and the bishops are going to be quite nice if he's able to get those out. But let's just keep on watching, see what happens. Here, just in case you were wondering why the advantage drops here, it wants knight to b3, right? I apologize. Here, right? Okay, so we go f4, and now it wants d takes, and really when a d takes e4, you just open in the center. But it makes a lot of sense why you don't want to play that move, because this bishop then becomes free. So it makes a lot of sense why Caruana didn't want to go for that. The engine does not like that. Just a back and forth game. It's blitz, right? And you got that knight to just clog it up, or double up, potentially sacrifice ideas over on this h6 pawn. Like knight takes, not right now, that's why we have the bishop back also. But just things to think about here. Slowly improving the position. Ooh, that was a big mistake actually. because now we get h4, and this knight is not happy. Which is what Alireza goes for, of course. Alireza just see, he can win many different ways. Just positional squeezes, tactical maneuvers, just all sorts of things. And now he's gone from 0.5 worse, so worse, not losing or anything, but now it's just much better here. And here's a pivotal move, quite difficult to find though. The only move that's cleanly winning was this knight f to e3 idea, which opens the rooks on the f file, allows that to put some pressure on this f7 pawn, as well as you protect this knight over here. And then you've also got bishop b1 ideas, which is just going to be devastating later on. But instead, he goes for the probably more natural knight to d6, knight c d6. But the issue here is that after playing that, you basically just lose some of the advantage. The sack doesn't work quite as nicely, because back in this position, right, if you just go immediately, the difference is that this bishop's, I think, on f8 instead of d6, which just means that I can't really interact in the game, as well as this f7 pawn, just very weak, just much better doing it that way. But here, the only move was rook. You have to play rook takes, right? Rook takes is the only move. But that's scary, right? Because you have to allow this, like, stuff like queen takes f7, and it's not quite fast enough, but it looks. Let's just go through that variation actually. So rook takes, right? And then takes, queen takes, you go here, but you narrowly don't have this. I mean, you don't have it if you had 3. But if we had another rook, for example, here, it would be mate, but we've run out of ammo. So it looks scary, but we have to allow that. But only thinking for 5 seconds here, and seeing that queen takes f7 looks scary, Fabiano decides to take with the pawn, which is a huge mistake here. Allowing bishop takes and just completely opening the king up. Game is basically over here. Gives a check. Takes that. Takes the bishop, and yeah. There's pretty much nothing to do here. Although, here, actually, he blunders, right? And remember, this is a big match, because if Caruana were to wins this, then they tie back up 1.5. And Caruana needs to be doing pretty good in the 5-minute section, which this game is in. Because if he doesn't, Alireza has a clear advantage in the lower time controls. So this would be a big one if he's able to get it. Especially when Alireza is completely winning, as he is. It says rook d1 is required. Rook d1 here. We're just penning it and playing normally. But having very little time, only took 2 seconds on the move, just goes for this natural rooks in the 7th idea. But probably blunders right back. As you can see, it's just a roller coaster ride. Freaking roller coaster. Because it's a time scramble here. But Alireza's typically seem to just be better in these positions. Which, and Fabi does not want to get in these, as you'll see. We'll see why. But also just historical. Again, gives the advantage back. But this time, oh Jesus. Let's see how many times he takes. And eventually, again, just like the one before, Caruana is doing very well in the game before, just blunders a basic queen pin. This time, he's doing fine, equality, and he just blunders a maiden one. Just can't hold his composure. Just that, what you're gonna see is it's a theme of the match, but it's just quite unfortunate that he misses that. I don't know what he saw there. Because clearly you can never move that. But I don't know. But Firouzja goes up 2.5, really setting the pace of this match. In the 5-1 section, which Fabi, if he's got any shot, really needs to drive home, really needs to do good. But Firouzja takes a 2.5 to a half-point lead, and here it's already not looking good for him. Fabi's had two positions where the one before this, he should have won the game, just was completely winning. And in this one, had many chances to draw, which he wasn't able to do. And if he's going to win the match, you just can't be doing stuff like that. But okay, now let's hop into the second game, this match. So this is game 7. Currently, Alireza's up 3.5 to 2.5, and it's the last game of the 5-minute section. So this is a really important game for Caruana, as if he wins, he can tie the match, but if he loses, then he's down by 2, and his odds are looking really, really bad. So, e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, just going to a Spanish. It's going to be the same line that they played before. Just this Berlin type structure, bishop e7, after coming out after bishop c5. Just all this good stuff, you know. d4, knight e7. Just protecting the pawn there. Just very straightforward. Now, if they ever play the queen to c7, then we're just going to push the pawn. 6. See? So it's just very... I'm just going to kind of go past this opening, because it's the same thing we basically already got on. And now let's pause here, as we've got into a position that I would say this is really out of the opening. So this is a unique game at this point. And here you got knight f5, which is going to threaten a fork. Because if this knight, so if we could deflect this knight, for example, we would have a fork over here, see? So we're just kind of, so that's the idea of Alireza here. Because if this, so we take, and then he's using the fact that we now have this fork, because if you take here, then you get that, which is why he doesn't take the knight, because it's not actually a free knight at all. But here, so it's nothing too crazy, right? But he's just kind of using this to get into a better endgame. If you take, well, so just want to point out that if you play rook d8 here, right? Then, so rook d8, just trying to utilize this pen. It's very important that we have this resource rook to a1, which then attacks this bishop. And after you take something like this, then white's just going to be better. So he doesn't go for that. He just takes it straight up. And we just get into this endgame where white's slightly better. And see if anybody can play for an advantage. Get behind the pawn. Move this king over to c4 because we need the rook to move. And we're going to be trying to just utilize this b-pawn. While it's basically going to be a race scenario. But we can't ever try that because then you get a pass f-pawn. And black's just completely winning there. And now, yeah, now you just resign, pretty much. Because you take this back here. I mean, what are you going to do? Yeah, you take there. And at this point, Caruana resigns because you can't do anything. You're either going to just give up a queen, or they're going to get the queen, whatever, regardless of what you do. Because I suppose the best thing would be to take the rook, but then queen, and this is just completely winning. So Caruana resigns here, and Alireza goes up by 2 points, 4.5, 2.5, as we enter the 3-minute section, where Alireza has a greater advantage than he did in the 5-minute section. So now let's go and hop into the final game that I'll be covering here. And as you can see, it's looking very good for Firouzja, and Caruana is struggling quite a bit. So this is going to be game number 14. Alireza is now leading 8-5, so he's up by 3 points. This is at the end of the 3-minute section, and Fabiano's got white, so he can still make it a match. But if he loses here, he's down by 4 going into the bullet. It's essentially over. So he's gonna go. He goes d4, as we can see here. d4, knight f6, c4, queen's gambit stop potentially. Okay, but we actually get into a nimzo because e6. Normally, then you go knight c3, bishop e4, all that good stuff. Knight c3, bishop e4. Yes, we go straight into the nimzo main line. e3, castles. So here black just takes, damaging the pawn structure, but white in return gets the bishop pair, but black also gets a tempo. So it's pretty equal. It's equal, but dynamically, I suppose. I mean, I would say I'd like white's position slightly better. We're splitting up this center for white. That's an interesting move, actually. Knight g3. The engine does not suggest that, but the idea, I think, is that we want to go knight f4, maybe? Or no, that we want to go knight f2, and we want to reinforce this e4 pawn. Right? Castles. Surrendering. So, now it's a pushing c5 is a threat in the future, potentially. Also, as you can see, Fabiano is actually staying up on the clock. Okay. Getting pushed back. But even white is actually still better here, just because of all the pins and the fact that you've got the center space, the bishop pair. So even though you're down a pawn, you're still better. Here, black's maneuvering the bishop because it was dead before. It was actually just getting pinned so that the knight on c4 couldn't move. So now he moves over to b7 to free that up. Also, he's running stuff like h6 potentially, because if the knight moves, that would be mate. Actually, oh, duh. Actually, h6 wasn't much about the red. I'm sorry, because you got knight f3. Duh. Yeah, white's just kind of clamping down. But black, if he's able to push back. So this is very dynamic. That's exactly what Caruana wants. But it's also what Alireza wants. Because he has a major advantage in wild positions with slow time in the clock. And at this point, they're down to 36 and 28 seconds. So, yeah. Takes, opening it up. And at this point, black is actually better. Because the king became exposed, basically. White's just going for an attack. Like I was saying before, he needs to win here. Or I mean, White's going for an attack. He's worse. It actually didn't even want him to take there. It wanted him to immediately just threat a mate, I believe. Yes, bishop g6. Or actually, bishop g6. Oh, it wants him to move it in the bishop to just attack this queen. Oh, and then it's almost trapped. I didn't even see that at all. And then it goes for this crazy line, knight e3, queen e... What? Oh, queen e2. Sorry, that makes sense. Queen e2, and now rook f7. This is the engine line. Queen takes e3. And somehow black is better here. That's wild. Oh. Because you're up an exchange and a pawn. I'm sorry. That makes sense. But that's wild. So he just takes back. Again. He takes 4 seconds on the move. He's not going to find the other line. And yes, we got the pin. And there he resigns. I'm just going to post these standings up on the board. But at this point, he goes up 9-5. And ends up winning the match 14.5 to 8.5. Where he will be now waiting for his opponent. Currently, Wesley So is playing Hans Niemann.
Yeah, here's the bracket.
Which I'm making a recap for.
Put that up for a couple seconds. So you can see that.
I'll just show the bracket up on the board. But again, just a very good showing by Alireza. We're nothing crazy in terms of gameplay, but just forcing Fabiano into bad positions, making him go into things that Firouzja wants, the wild time scrambles, and just consistently taking advantage of that. Even beating him in the 5-minute section, so it's very impressive. But yes, thank you for watching. And now get out of here. Get out of here.